Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Converse with Clover. It's been a while. A huge thank you to my amazing subscriber who reached out to me by email and social media asking what happened to me. Well, I needed some time to recharge so I can continue to give you my absolute best. But now I am officially back and coming in hot with some powerful interviews, fresh content, and yes, some eye candy for the ladies. I'm also excited to announce that I have a new co-host joining me, and we have some great things planned that you don't want to miss. But enough about me. Let's get into today's episode. So April is Second Chance Month, and I couldn't think of a better guest to kick things off than with someone who truly embodies what second chance looks like. So without further delay, let's welcome my guest, Phillip Alvin Jones. Hey, Phillip, welcome to Converse with Clover.
Thank you. How you doing, Clover? It's nice to be here. I love your show, and I couldn't wait to do it. So definitely, let's get to it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. So, for the audience that don't know anything about Phillip Jones, even though we've been doing a campaign about who Phillip Jones is, tell us something about yourself that you would like for us to know.
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't know where to begin or where to start. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I've been incarcerated for 34 years since the age of 19. I had a difficult upbringing. Wasn't all bad, but you know, the circumstances are what led and contributed to my choices that led me down certain paths in my life. I'm just a hard working man, even though I'm incarcerated, and I like to bring awareness to different conversations and different areas of communication. So I don't know what else that I could tell you right now, but, you know, hopefully when you ask me some more questions, I'll have some better stuff for you.
Okay, awesome. So let's take it back to the beginning. You grew up in Baltimore. Tell me, what was your life like when you was growing up in Baltimore?
Thank you. That's a great question. Believe it or not, the first 5 years of my life had structure. Both of my parents were in the household. My father, he worked for the city, and my mother stayed home, and she took care of us. However, because my parents suffered from both drug and alcohol addictions, there was a lot of turbulence in the home. So by the time I was like five, my mother took me and my brother, and she left. It was at this time that things went from bad to worse for us. Needless to say, there was a lot of neglect and instability. Looking back, I realize now that, and I understand that it was due to the substance use disorders that they both had, and they had suffered it throughout their lives. And so that was the cause of me and my two brothers. We was in a space, literally having to fend for ourselves. And as kids, this can be a very unsafe and even scary situation to live under. So, that's it. That's the gist of it.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. As children, we look to our parents to provide for us, to take care of us, and to make sure that we're safe. So I'm sorry that you and your brother had to deal with that. But we do understand, how substance abuse, any type of substance abuse can lead to neglect. So thank you for sharing. I know that, talking about, our past and the lives that we live and how we struggle, it's not easy to talk about. So I appreciate you sharing. So my next question
Mhm.
is, if someone had intervened earlier in your life, what kind of support or opportunity might have changed your path?
Well, I think because of the way I grew up, hoping always to be delivered from my circumstance, I had made it a point never to live on ifs. That said, for the sake of this interview, I can offer this. If if a child is raised with loving parents and they have proper guidance, financial means, access to resources, and they have positive role models, the child will succeed. And the reverse is going to happen if the child lacks these. And so when you ask that question, someone had intervened. Intervention, in my opinion, looks like stability. Intervention looks like, people who don't neglect their children because they're going through certain challenges and things in their own lives. A child needs that support system And once you
Thank you
surround a
so
child with
much.
all of those
And
things,
that is our message for
more than
today.
likely
Thank you
the
so
child
much
is
for
going to
tuning
stay
in.
on course,
And
and
we will see you on
they
our
will
next
probably
episode.
avoid circumstances like mine.
Wow, that is so true. I echo you on that, right? Stability is important, a support. They always said that when you're raising a child, you need a tribe. So yeah, definitely, I can understand that. So as we're jumping into April, right, which is
Mhm.
considered Second Chance Month, right? And you have been incarcerated for 34 years. What does the idea of second chance mean to you today?
I appreciate this question because as we do approach Second Chance Month, it's very important that we are able to comprehensively speak to this subject. America is oftentimes referred to as the land of second chances for various reasons. And I like to think and believe that none of us are without flaw, blame, or fault, whatever the offense at some point in our lives. And so if we take responsibility and we are held to account, and if we demonstrate remorse and make amends for our offenses, and we then turn around and renew ourselves through positive change, pro-social behavior and productivity, are we not worthy of forgiveness and a second chance at life? When I think about second chances, I'm saying there is no one walking on the face of the earth who hasn't made a mistake, who hasn't done something that they regretted. But as people, as a society, have to have enough grace to allow someone to make that amendment and then come back and renew themselves for a change.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Yes, you hit that. We have the First Step Act that was passed a few years ago, which I benefited from it. And I love the name First Step because it's a first step for something new, and then we have a second step. Do you, Philip, believe that you ever had a first chance?
No, and that's not looking for some type of sympathy, even though I've done something offense to someone. But I don't believe so because when you grow up in the circumstances like I did, you didn't have any guardrails. You didn't have any protections. You was already at risk as a child, and the system failed. So if the system fails, that same child who was in danger of being swallowed up by his circumstances, and then a couple of years later does commit some type of offense, and then you send him to prison and give him a life sentence, and then say, okay, well, we're gonna give you a second chance. Going back to what you said, there wasn't even a first chance
Mhm.
because as a community and as a society, we fail the children when we don't make sure that they are protected from all the traumas and the things that affect them, which lead them down the path, and therefore later on commit some type of crime that's going to put them in prison.
Wow, that is so true. That is so true. I think that environment plays a big part. Poverty plays a big part. Education plays a big part. And when you grow up in communities that are underserved, I think right there, right, you are denied the opportunity of a first chance. And so committing a crime in Baltimore, we already know how Baltimore is. Back then, it was even worse. And so I appreciate you sharing your story, but I definitely will say that I don't believe that you were given a first chance because if you were, I don't believe that you would be incarcerated because, man, you have accomplished so much while incarcerated. And if you was out and given that first chance, I can only imagine the greatness you would have, and the blessings and all the things that you would have done. So, Philip, yes, we are working. We may not have gotten the first chance, but we definitely working to get you that second chance because you are deserving of it. So thank you
For
for that.
sure, thank you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So can you share some ways you have grown, with how you have changed in these 34 years compared to when you first went into prison?
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely preface that because I'm gonna start when I was 25.
Okay.
I came in at 19, but when I was 25 back in Maryland, I was sent to what was then called the Maryland Supermax. for my involvement in what was a prison ride at the time. I stayed in the Supermax for 5 years. While I was there, I had a lot of time to contemplate and review my life choices and the consequences of my conduct. I remember waking up one day and saying I was done with gangs and corrupt activities. And at the time, it was just a thought. It was unmanifested, to which I had no clear plan of how I was going to do it and when this would take place. I just knew I was tired of my situation and I didn't want to continue in it. And for me, this didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, I was able to find a catalyst for my change, and that catalyst was education. I started by reading, and I gotta say, I probably read hundreds of books. I can't even tell you, from Malcolm X to Marcus Garvey, to Naim Akbar, to John Henry Clark, to J.A. Rogers. You name it, I had read it, because I was in there 23 hours a day, locked in. What these books did, they showed me the characters of great men, and they also taught me about my history. Because the start of knowledge is knowledge itself. And until you know who you are, you can never discover your purpose. So after my studies, I realized that my values had started to change, that I no longer believed in self-destructive concepts that only contributed to the demise of my people. And I think it was at that moment that I now knew that I would not be looking back, and that a course was finally set. So from then, I started acquiring for classes. I was still in the Supermax. I was running the class there. We had 5 men in there off the tier. I was working the day shift and the night shift, cleaning my tier. And I had the trust of some of the high-ranking COs. They wouldn't even give the other men the job. And so I started seeing that when you are standing out, when you are doing different things, they want you to be the one that they call on to handle other things. And so I started liking those type of feelings of being somebody that was doing the right thing. So I said, when I get out of the Supermax, I'm going to go and I'm going to make a difference. And that's what I did,
And you sure did. You sure did. Man, you have accomplished so much. Let me tell you, when I talk about second chances, right? When I talk about rehabilitation, I mean, I said, man, if there was a picture of a person in a dictionary that represents rehabilitation, that represents second chances, it's you. Because I mean, you have done it all and done it all in grace. Even though the time, that you spent in prison, you still did it with grace. I even say to people, I say, this guy, check this out, what he does. He doesn't even wait for the programs to be available to him in prison. He has reached out to external organizations just so he can be ready for when he comes home. And I'm telling you, Philip, I am super proud of you. I'm one of your biggest fans, and I'm your biggest advocate as well, right? And I know that you're going to come home soon. So thank you so much for all the great work that you're doing. I know it's hard, right, to
Yeah.
stay committed, living in a system, where you have outgrown. We spoke about, outgrowing the box, and you have definitely outgrown the box. So I appreciate you. But let's jump into the books that you have written. Why did you write those books? You wrote 2 books. Let's start with Exit to Excellent. Why did you decide to write that book?
And that's what I was going to say. People ask, why did you write a reentry book and you have a life sentence? I said I wrote a reentry book because the reentry books that I was reading, they excluded people like myself that didn't have a release date. And not only that, most of these books was talking about, housing and employment and transportation. And I'm like, if you don't address the trauma, then the behaviors that took place that led you where you are would continue to exist. I said, so I wrote a reentry book for myself. I said, because I figured if I learned everything there was to know about reentry, then I could show them that I was ready to release and that my transition would be smooth. And so that's what I did. And that book, Exit to Excellence, starts off with trauma, and then it goes into what went wrong, and then it goes into values, and then it continues on to solutional things that you can do in order to break that cycle. And so I tried to make my book a little different, but I also wanted it to cover all bases.
Wow, that is awesome. That is awesome. And I can hear people asking that question, what does he know about reentry, right? He's not out, so why write a reentry book? But you have to be prepared from day one, right? So man gives you a life sentence, but we already know that, God is bigger than anything. So, it doesn't mean that you're going to stay there for the rest of your life. You can be home tomorrow. So why not be
Hmm.
ready, right?
You got to stay ready. If you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready.
There you go. There you go. You're getting ready from day one. When I was incarcerated, the next day I was preparing to go home because every day I was going home until finally I was able to go home. And that's why when I came home, I always tell people that when I came home, success immediately met me. Why? Because I was ready. I was prepared. I kept my mind on the outside, even though my body was inside, my mind was outside because, you cannot incarcerate my mind. You can incarcerate my body, but you can't incarcerate my mind. Okay, so we are back with Philip. He had to take a break. So we're back. So thank you, Philip, for coming back on and joining me. And so we're going to get back into the questions. So,
For sure. Thank you so much. I'm ready, and I'm glad to be back.
oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. So, what reforms do you believe would make the justice system fairer and more humane, especially for people who doing a life sentence?
Well, I think it's a number of things, but to start, I think rescinding the 1994 crime bill, which is a bill that Bill Clinton and Joe Biden they used to decimate black communities, especially in the state of Maryland. I think those have to be abolished. I think also judges should retain jurisdiction over certain cases and sentences for individuals, so that in time, as individuals show progress in the system and make changes, their sentence can be reduced or modified. I think that's important. And finally, there should not be a deadline for filing appeals in court, considering that not everyone is able to show errors in their case or their trial was unfair at the time of sentencing. With these time bars and these sentencing, I mean these issues that you cannot raise after a certain amount of time. In most cases, a year. This keeps people locked into the system when there's no other recourse. So I think that if we're talking about reforms that can be made through legislative process or what have you, they got to go back and fix that. And Biden should have done so before he left.
Right. I totally agree with you on that right there. We have so many black and brown people, especially young boys really that got caught up in the 1994 crime bill and just languishing in prison. And so I believe that something needs to be done. Yes, I echo you. Biden should have done something. He did say, that it was a mistake and a mistake is worth correcting, right? And so he should have done something, before he left. So I totally agree with you on that. I also agree with
Mm-hmm.
that when someone is incarcerated for a long period of time, right? Especially if the sentence is not only punitive, but also they expect people to rehabilitate. I think that there needs to be a second look, right? And so they need to assign some type of correction officers or probation officers to take a second look at a person's record, see what they have accomplished while they've been incarcerated for such a long time, right? And bring them back into court. And if they're doing great, reduce their sentence and send them home. Give them an opportunity instead of just having them locked up for years. And what are they accomplishing while they're being locked up? Nothing, right? You're stunting people's growth when you do certain things like that. So yes, I totally agree with you on that. And I hope that, this will be something that they do change as we move forward to change the landscape of the criminal justice system, that they will definitely look into things like that. So thank you for that. We are in agreement with that.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So, Philip, I cannot even begin to imagine what 34 years is like in prison, right? When I was
Mm-hmm.
sentenced, and I was sentenced to 10 years and 1 month. So we just when I talk about the 10 years, I said to my girlfriends, 121 months. They're like, take off that 1 month. I said, no, I'm not taking off that 1 month. I was sentenced to 121 months. And I could not even begin to think of what my life would be like in 10 years, you know. And so I
Mm.
cannot even fathom how 34 years is for you. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it's devastating to my family in particular, my children, my brothers, my nieces and nephews. It's devastating to come in as a teenager, not even understanding the consequences of your actions. In light of the brain science today, proves that we're just children. We don't know what we're doing. We shouldn't be held to such high account. And so when I think about all the time that I've served, for the first part of my incarceration, I didn't even understand what had happened. I was still living as if I was out in society, and these people told me I wasn't going home. And that's how you know that as a child, you think as a child, it didn't even hit me yet. I'm sitting here running around wild in prison, doing the most, not even thinking, not hitting the law library or nothing, just wasting time because I thought this can't be possible. I'm going home eventually. They're going to let me out of here. That's the adolescent mind.
Mhm.
We're not culpable 100% because we can't even think or fathom consequences. That's how our brain is so undeveloped as children. So to get past that part, I did come in fast and got my GED because in the back of my mind, I said, if for no other reason, I just want to be intelligent. I want to have an education. So I went and got the GED immediately, and then I enrolled in college. I'm gonna start taking a lot of classes. But then, we were disrupted by a transfer from a prison, and then we were sent to a new one that didn't have any programs. They wasn't even finished building, and we got down there, and for the young people, the idle mind is the workshop of the devil. And so we started clicking up, creating gangs, and doing all kinds of nonsense, as you will learn later, that's got us in so much trouble. And we got away from the progress that was made, and then I ended up taking 3, 4 steps back. So throughout my incarceration, it's been very difficult because until I was transferred out, I didn't have the space to transform, and so it was a gradual process. So I like to say the 34 years. I don't know what human being needs that amount of time to mature, to develop, to grow, to become a better person. But I just know that it's excessive, and I know that it has taken a great toll on me. But I keep striving, and I never give up. So, I'm looking for the opportunity to be back in my community with my people.
Right. Yeah. Wow. You said a mouthful, but a mouthful of knowledge. And I'm so grateful, that by the grace of God that you have made it, how, I know that these questions that I'm asking you, I just want the audience to kind of get a better idea of basically what it is that you are going through and why the call for second chance for you is so urgent, right? And so when we're out there and we're advocating for you, we're advocating for someone that needs to be home, someone who has served 34 years in prison, someone who have life in prison, someone who, if is sentenced now, would not get this time, right? And so we need to,
Mhm.
bring awareness to that because if you were sentenced now for this crime, I mean, you committed a crime, yes, but I always say, you know what? He did not take a life. And I'm not using that to mitigate the severity of your crime, but I want to point that out because when you talk about life in prison, you talk about someone serving 34 years, immediately people's like, oh, he must have killed somebody, right? Because those are the times that people that take a life is getting, right? So immediately that's what people go to. Oh yeah, he took someone's life. But they find out no, he did not, they're like, what? This can't be possible.
Mhm.
But it is possible. It is
Oh
possible.
yeah,
Yeah.
because Baltimore City, it has such a high volume of violence, and there's such a high murder rate, and there's so much going on in that inner city.
most people who have a violent offense, if they go to trial and get convicted, they end up getting a life sentence. But what I would like to say is that for those who don't know, at 19, when I did get arrested for this offense, it was an attempted murder, a shooting of another young man. Fortunately for me, he lived, and well, not just fortunately for me, fortunately for him, and thank God for that. But what I'm saying is that in a lot of different places around the country, for the offense that I have, I know people who got 3 years. I know people who got 5 years. I know, people who got not a lot of time. And like Clover is saying, is not uh, to lessen the severity of the crime. It was a violent offense that harmed someone, which I am completely remorseful for. All I'm saying is that, he's alive and well, and he's doing great things in the community, and I am still here, and I've already served 34 years of that for that crime, and that's my only incarceration.
Right, right, definitely, definitely. Well, this is something that I'm going to say. This is not something that I want you to answer, but I just, want to know how 9 years turn into life in prison. That I can't understand. But that's for another another time. How do you keep
Mhm.
hopeful after all these years?
Well, that's a good question. Thank you for that. Also, I'm of the belief that justice, even if it's delayed, cannot forever be denied.
Mm,
I remain hopeful. I always remain hopeful because I have seen others be released who had worse crimes and circumstances than I did, and also because one day my change will be noticed. My change will be noticed by those who have the power to set me free. So I stay hopeful because I understand that tomorrow, even though it's right around the corner, tomorrow can make a change that the whole world takes witness for. So I never give up because some of the things that I never believed that would happen have happened. And so you must stay hopeful, and you can't never give up, especially when your life is on the line.
absolutely, absolutely. You continue to hold on to hope, and there's so many of your supporters that's holding on to hope with you, so you're not alone. And then when you you know put them all together, that's a lot of hope. And we know that, with hope and with faith, something is going to turn in your favor, and we hoping that it will turn very, very soon. So, in what way can the community and legislator work together to create more equitably opportunities for rehabilitation and reintegration?
For me, I think with this question, I got to convey to lawmakers is that we all human beings, just like you. We are sons, we're fathers, we're brothers and sisters, and for the most part, I know personally, I acknowledge that I have flaws, and I acknowledge that I partake in some harm. But what I've also done in the process is the work of healing and growing into a better person. And all I'm asking for is an opportunity to show that I've transformed and that I can return to my community so that I could be a help at saving other young people who did not have circumstances that would who would not find themselves in circumstances like myself. So if I could save one person, I feel like I've done a great service. So that's one of the things that I want the legislators to hear when they consider certain bills, such as second chances and second look bills.
Right, right. And you're doing that. You're doing that. You just created a scholarship program for underserved kids in Baltimore. Tell us about that.
Yes, I have a nonprofit organization. It's called Inside Outside Consults. And what I've dedicated my organization to is a scholarship program. Because as I said in the beginning, education is the platform by which people can spring themselves forward. Education is also the vehicle by which people change certain values and things that they've learned that was not at all good for their growth or who they hope to achieve. So we created the scholarship programs because we wanted to take these young people who was at risk of being recruited into gangs, and we wanted to give them an opportunity to distance themselves from it. So what we would do is, so in case they have hardships of paying tuitions and whatnot, that we would provide we would provide the tuition fee for 3 young people coming out of these situations where they find themselves at risk. And so that's why we're doing it, because that's the start of it. Get them out of their communities where they're at risk for being recruited into these gangs, and send them to a college setting where they have the space enough for peace of mind and they can grow through their education.
And that is amazing. That is amazing. Look at all that you're doing. And so I will tell you this, I will be the first one to donate, but I will also put the link in this video so people who want to make a donation to help these kids with their education, they can do so because it's so needed. And Philip, thank you so much, right? With your situation, I know that it's hard, with lack of support, finances in prison, but you're still doing this. And I know that the sale of your books is helping you to make this happen. And so we encourage, folks who can jump in and help, even $25, $30 to help, Philip send these kids to college. That would be awesome. So yes, as I said, I'll be the first to donate, and I'm going to encourage everyone to donate because this is a good cause. So
Yes.
yeah, so as we are preparing to come to a close, I just want to ask you a question. If someone would say to you that you're going home tomorrow, how would you feel?
Well, I guess that question right there is one where people are probably going to say it's only obvious. I would feel like I can now exhale, that I would probably faint from happiness, that I would be overwhelmed by joy, that I would probably begin to cry and be wound up emotionally from such a long journey that I didn't know when it would come to an end. So that would be the greatest feeling of my life, literally. And I don't even know how to describe it because words can't describe it. And also because I've never been released. I've been here and I've not known what it felt like to be released from prison.
Wow, wow. Well, get ready, right? Get your mind ready, because that's going to happen. And think about all the firsts, right? The first of all many firsts that you're going to do when you get home, all the first cars you're going to buy, all the first food you're going to taste that you have never tasted before, the first vacation spots. So you get ready for all of those things because it's going to happen. So one more question before we go. If someone listening to the podcast is struggling or feel forgotten by the system, what would you say to them?
I would say to them, hold on, help is on the way. And if you feel like you have been forgotten, you haven't been forgotten. There are numerous of people working diligently every single day to make changes to the system. There are organizations, there are kind-hearted people, there are people who have been inside, who understand the traumas that you're suffering. And these people, you can call them what you want, but trust me and believe me, it's guardian angels out there so that it works for everyone. We want the system to work in a way that helps to heal people, not some, but not just a few, but the many. So I'll tell you, don't give up, don't give in, and make sure you stay prayed up because definitely your time is coming. So I'm going to always encourage you. I'm going to always give you moral support. I'm going to keep putting information out here for people to say, oh, man, something is coming. You know what I mean? Because when you got that takes you through the next day. You do it one day at a time, but you'll get there. Trust me on that.
Yes, definitely. Totally agree with you on that one. Totally agree. So we have a campaign for you. It's called Do You Know Who Phillip Jones Is? So as we are coming to an end, I think this is a good time to ask you, tell us who Phillip Jones is.
Phillip Jones, he's a human being first and foremost. He's not a label. Phillip Jones is a father, he's a parent. Phillip Jones is a son, two parents. And Phillip Jones is an uncle to nieces and nephews. But also, He is a human being of complex means. He is a hard worker for the people. He is someone who likes to see changes be made, and he is someone who takes action to ensure that. Philip Jones is also someone who has came from nothing, has decided that he was going to do something for change in his own community, and Philip Jones believes that through hard work and resilience that you can overcome anything. So for those of you out there who want to know who I am, that's just a small package of it, but there's a big package as well, where I can go on and on. But I'm not here to do that. I'm just here to let you know that you introduced to me. Now you got to go do the rest of the research yourself so you can see all the other things.
Amen. I love that. Well, thank you so much. So, Philip, tell us how the audience how they can get in contact with you. Of course, I'll put all of those information in the link. And so, how can they get in contact with you also on social media as well? And where you're at Airway Heights?
Okay, so to begin, you can get a hold of me if you have access to the Securus communication platform. You go to securusnet.com, and then you put in my DOC number, which is 881-507. Look me up in Washington State, and add yourself to my email. If you don't have that or you don't understand how that works, we'll put those links out there so you can see. My social media is Phillip Alvin Jones on Facebook, IG. I got LinkedIn. You can find me everywhere. Also, you can get at me at my email address, which is philipalvinjr@gmail.com. So get at me if you need to, know more about what I'm doing. My website is also out there. That's www.philipajonesconsultingllc.com. So get at me, and I'll be looking forward to hearing you or working with you and collaborating with you always.
Always. All right, Philip, as we are coming to a close, any final words?
Yes, I got final words. The community has to not only educate themselves about subjects such as reintegration and rehabilitation, but they also have to be willing to put in the work necessary to ensure positive outcomes. We have to elect people who believe that changes are needed in the criminal legal system. And we have to get at the legislators and let them know that they have to be willing to evolve in some of their ideological views and perspectives, which protect some but cause great harm to others. We need to host town halls where professionals in the field of criminal justice and formerly incarcerated men and women share the table and talk about issues and tell their stories. Because unless or until they understand that people are not just criminals, that they suffer from traumas and that they need mental health resources, and punishment alone doesn't heal people. Until we got that type of understanding between ourselves, the community, and the legislative body, then we're going to constantly be in these antiquated, draconian policies that are outdated. With new science, we got to change our minds, and we have to proceed and stay in line with that new science, because we are still living in the Stone Ages, and these things clearly don't work.
That's a lot. Yes, definitely. Definitely. I agree with you. And thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate you. And as I said, we will never stop until you're home. So, Philip, and that's a wrap.
Thank you, Clover. It was a great. I love the questions.
Thank
I'm
you.
here for it.
All right.